Good morning. Hopefully that storm didn't wake you up in the 5 o'clock hour. It's like light.
I was just thinking about that Colin Cowherd clip. I was going to mention earlier when we were talking about the schedule last hour, Joe, that I was watching Colin Cowherd yesterday, and he was talking about this, and I'm like, wow, yeah, he's making some good points. I didn't look at this Chiefs schedule, and I was going to say, hey, pull up the Chiefs schedule, because I did that, and it's right. And he makes a good point about the Brazil game.
Yeah.
So last year, if you go back to last year, the Packers and Eagles played in Brazil, right, to start the season.
Yeah.
And the Eagles win the game. Well, then they go to week number 2, and the Eagles, where's the Eagles here? Hold on, let me go back to their schedule from last year real quick here, pull it up. Okay, Eagles last year beat the Packers in Brazil. They come home and lose to the Falcons, 22-21. And it just wasn't, like, you could maybe blame it on the trip to Brazil and then coming back. And even for the Packers, they did win the next week, but they won 16-10 against the Colts, right? Like,
sure.
You're telling that in this year now, the Chiefs are going to play the Chargers in Brazil. And when they come back, who do they have here? They have the Lions after that. Coming back. I think, is that their second week game? Hold on. No, they have the Eagles. They have the Eagles. They have the Eagles. There you go. So they have the Chargers in Brazil, and they come back and play the Eagles. So I do think, as much as we talk about, the point is the Bills' schedule being kind of conducive to this travel and the times and all that. I think the Chiefs is less like that, and there's nothing that any Bills fan should look at and think the Chiefs got some sort of advantage. You might be mad they're on these holidays and the Bills aren't, whatever.
Right.
But the Chiefs certainly competitively do not have a schedule that lends itself to them having a lot of these, better weeks for them built in.
Right. It's annoying in that it does feel like whenever the Bills are not on TV, the Chiefs are going to be on TV, right? Because they're in all of these national window games and spotlight games. But you're right. Like, the consequence of that is, Cowherd just went through it a little bit in the short weeks that you have when you go into play. I didn't realize that they play a Monday night game against Washington the week before they come to Buffalo.
Yes.
That's not only a short week, that's a short week against a pretty tough opponent.
That's right.
At least they have that game at home. And then the other thing that, of course, the Brazil game does is their travel. Jeremy had the stat earlier in the week that they have more miles traveled just in that Brazil trip than the Bills do in their whole season. Wow. So it's because I think it's 5,500 miles to Sao Paulo from Kansas City. So you think 11,000 back and forth. I think the Bills are like 10,200 for the entire year. Bills have one of the best travel schedules of the year. And you just look at strength of schedule. So Dennis Selman, who covers the NFL, he had a graph the other day. You see a lot of different strength of schedules, right? Some of them it's based on, last year's
Warren Sharp's
record.
is based on this year's projected record with Vegas.
Okay, his are on the Vegas odds. This one is on the Super Bowl odds. Maybe the win totals might be a better way what Warren Sharp does, but this one's on the Super Bowl odds. And from hardest to easiest, so number 1 being the hardest and 32 being the easiest, Kansas City ranks number 11 in strength of schedule. So 11th hardest. The Bills rank 26th. So that is the 6th easiest in the league this year. So that's in your favor as well. It all kind of goes to, how does all that sound? How does all this sound? Picking the Chargers to win that division. It does, in some retrospect, maybe sound a little bit like doubting the Bills last year before the season, which there was a lot of that. But it's hard for me because I want to respect what the Chiefs have done. I want to fear them because they always figure it out. And then another part of me just keeps thinking, man, look at all those games that they got lucky in last year. And more on the football end of things, like a legitimate football point, is, okay, their biggest problem last year was their offensive line, right? What did they do? They lost Joe Thuney. They traded him away. Now, he was playing out of position at the end last year anyway, but he was great at guard and he was average at tackle maybe when they kind of had to play him there. But he's gone, so he's out the window. They drafted Simmons, the first-round tackle in the first round, and a lot of people seem to like him. But there's an injury risk there, so maybe there's a little bit of a boom or bust nature to him as a prospect because of the injuries. And then the other guy they signed, the other offensive tackle they signed from San Francisco, was immediately met with, like, really? You gave this guy that contract? He has 12 starts in his 4-year career with the 49ers, and they plan on him, I think, being a part of it. And the rest of it's the same. So, I don't know, Sal. Like, I look at the Chiefs, and the question really here that I put a poll up on is, what's more likely? That the Bills have added enough to where that's what will get them over Kansas City. They've added enough. They're finally going to beat the Chiefs in a playoff game. Is that more likely, or is it more likely that you're going to have a road to the Super Bowl that doesn't go through the Chiefs? And I'm a little bit surprised to see that 65% of those on Twitter right now are saying Chiefs-less road to the Super Bowl. Like, their line, that's it for me, is I don't think their line is that much better, and I'm just hoping that it finally catches up with them.
I voted, by the way, and I did vote for road to the Super Bowl. Not going through Kansas City is more likely.
Sure.
The reason I voted for that is I just think that the odds, the Bills have to match up again then against the Chiefs every year. Like, the odds of the Bills and the Chiefs matching up. Yes, I know they've done it 3 times here in the past, 4 or 5 years, whatever it is, in the playoffs. I get all that. And there's a likelihood that could happen again and continue happening as long as Mahomes and Josh are the quarterbacks. But it still has to happen. And generally, you're going to get them as between seeds 1 and 3, maybe. So you're probably not talking until the AFC Championship game. So along the way, one of them gets tripped up is more likely, or something happening in the regular season where they don't have the full season you expect, or somebody steps up a little bit, is more likely them actually matching up at the end of the year in the playoffs again.
Right.
It's not about the Bills actually beating the Chiefs. We've seen them come. Look, they were 13 seconds away.
Yeah.
They were 1 possession away, and they were 1 possession away again, right? To me, the Bills can beat the Chiefs. I don't subscribe to the theory they just can't beat them. They haven't beaten them. They've had chances of beating them. It hasn't worked out. But you still have to play them, and everything has to have, all of those things have to come together to even let that happen in the first place.
That's right. And what could be the difference that we've already kind of spent some time on is if you have the 1 seed. Because really, the idea of not having to play the Chiefs on the way to the Super Bowl, if you get the 1 seed, that really is one of the benefits. Like, not to spend all this energy on one opponent, but it's tough not to. It is 4 playoff losses to them already. So it's going to be natural that you're going to want to do that. If you get the 1 seed, look how it went for Kansas City last year. I mean, they did end up playing the Bills, but the Bills had to beat Denver, which they had a pretty easy time doing, and then they had a tough challenge. I mean, that Ravens team, by a lot of metrics, was one of the best offenses we'd ever seen. One of the best rushing offenses we'd ever seen, I think more specifically. And they found a way to get through it. What did the Chiefs have to do? They just had to beat the Texans, who kind of limped their way into the playoffs. That's it. The benefit of the 1 seed, not only, the much more obviously valuable thing to a Bills fan is if you get the 1 seed, well, that could be me this year. Well, I only have to play 1 game to get to the AFC Championship game, and if it's a home game against the winner of a Texans-Chargers matchup or something similar, I mean, sign me up. But the other smaller benefit that you would get is you're going to make Kansas City's road for themselves more challenging. And, hey, now you got to go beat your wild card team, whatever. But now, you got to go play Baltimore in round 2. Or you got to go play Cincinnati in the second round of the playoffs. And maybe you even have to go on the road. This is all, by the way, assuming that both of these teams win their divisions, which I think is easier to assume for the Bills. But that's why I said the same thing, because I don't know. I don't think their roster is a whole lot better, and I was one that thought for a lot of last year that Chief team was good, but they certainly weren't 15-win good, and I saw a lot of games where they were getting lucky, and I guess I'm really hoping that the karma catches up with them at some point in time. But I also have people in our YouTube chat that are like, hey, you don't have to show the Chiefs respect, but show those refs respect. Which I'm not. I'm not going to be the refs jinx fix the game guy. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't see vast improvement from their offseason. I like the Bills' offseason better. From all the fallout of the Brandon Beane appearance a couple of weeks ago and how, we were talking about receiver, I do like their offseason. a lot. They didn't get the whale. They didn't get Myles Garrett or Trey Hendrickson or any of these superstar pass rushers, but they added a lot on defense, and I do like the two receivers they've brought in. I do think the Bills have one of the best lines in football. Like, I didn't literally dislike anything that they've done. Kansas City, as I mentioned, like I think the Chiefs needed to get better on the offensive line, and I don't really feel like they did.
Yeah, they lost one, lost a couple offensive linemen. They drafted one, and there's still some questions, right? Especially like who's protecting Patrick Mahomes on his left side, to make sure that they can do that right. So, no doubt about that. I was going to go through the names here, and I lost my page. I was going to bring them up, but either way, they've done that. They lost some guys on defense.
Yes.
Reed, the safety.
They lost Justin Reed. They also, I'm pulling it up too. Did they lose?
I did.
Here we go. So they signed, again, you look at some of their ads. Jalen Moore, by the way, is the name of that offensive tackle that I mentioned earlier.
Thank you.
Comes from the Niners. He, 2 years, $30 million, has started 12 of his 55 games in the NFL. And again, the instant reaction I saw from, Warren Sharp and a lot of the, kind of the filmy break that Mina Kimes, I think, was talking about him, like, I don't think he's going to have to be a lot better in Kansas City if he's going to be worth this contract. And then they draft Josh Simmons. Josh Simmons is kind of a wild card here because that's a first-round pick and a super talented guy, and if he didn't have injury problems, he probably would have gone in the first 10 to 15 picks. But he does have an injury background. So if he stays healthy, then that could be a huge get for them. And if he doesn't, then I think you've got a pretty tough offensive line for a Chiefs team that just got dominated in the Super Bowl by a team with a great defensive line.
See, this is tough for me because I don't ever want to seem like I'm just thinking and saying something stupid like the Chiefs really aren't that good, because they are. They're great, and they have Patrick Mahomes, and they have Andy Reid. But I do think there's a discussion in here to think about, in some ways, what we thought about the Patriots, what a lot of the league did for many years, which is, okay, well, how much is them being great versus just like nobody in their division has done anything to mount any sort of semblance of threat to them.
Sure.
And that gets to your point of then you get to the 1 seed, then you have the easier road to the playoffs. But the problem with that thinking is once they get there, they still win. And they're playing better teams. And they're going on the road, and they're beating teams. And they're finding ways to squeak out wins at the end of games, right? So even if you want to get to, well, look, it's not really about Kansas City. As great much as they have Mahomes and Reed, it's really about the fact that no one can stop them from this being in a great position at the end of the year.
Yeah.
You could say that all you want, but then they win anyway, and that's the problem I have with saying it.
It's a good point. As much as, their road could be tougher and their regular season could look, more tumultuous than it has, you still might trust them to win in the playoffs. Because a lot of it, this is why I would be hopeful, while I also would think it's more likely that the Bills just wouldn't have to play them. I would hope they wouldn't have to play them because I just feel like Andy Reid and Steve Spagnuolo are going to cook something up. They're going to have the answers. They're going to have 3 plays ready to go that you haven't seen all year that they're just going to unleash at the perfect time, and they're going to have the game plan that's right for it. That's the trust I think that those two specifically have built up. So you're right. If they have a tougher road, they might still manage to make it through just based on that. So really, and then it does come down to, can someone take them out? And so far, the only team that has been able to do it, no matter how, in the AFC, no matter how vulnerable the Chiefs have looked, which they have for 2 years, the only team that's been able to do it is the Bengals. That's it. And to be fair, I don't know that the Bengals are the same. Remember when the Bengals did it? They shut them out in the second half.
Yep.
And
the defense certainly is and hasn't been.
Do they look like a defense right now that could shut Patrick Mahomes out in a half of football? Not even close. So this is where, when we talked a couple weeks ago about who's the next athlete that's got to win, who McDavid comes up, like someone they got to win the championship, because this is right after Rory won the Masters. And the first 2 names you could so easily get to are Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. It really comes down to those 2 teams, the Bills and the Ravens. Come on. So one of these 2, and for our sakes, obviously we'd hope it's the Bills. One of these 2, they're both capable. They've just got to do it. That's it. like I'll talk about the Chiefs' offensive line probably all season, and maybe their receivers and their defense, and we'll break down what's actually going on in these games. But eventually, we're going to arrive likely at either the Ravens or the Bills playing the Chiefs in a playoff game, and one of these times, these two teams, not just the quarterbacks, teams got to just freaking do it against Kansas City.
I think that the Chargers are the team that you look at first and foremost to kind of pose
division.
Any sort of immediate threat to them. But I'll say what I said earlier. Until they do it, I don't know if I can believe it. Because
I know
they've been that team before, and it just hasn't materialized.
I've believed in the Chargers so many times. It is absolutely pulling the football away from Charlie Brown. That's
right.
That is the Chargers. And I guess it comes down to how much you trust Harbaugh to be different. And last year, they weren't fully formed. They hadn't really put everything together. There was a lot of players from the previous regime, but there's also the quarterback, and the quarterback imploded in a playoff game. So do you trust him? I mean, maybe the Chargers just kind of rub off on everybody a little bit where, hey, something's going to go wrong. And for them, they won 11 games last year, and they didn't look like it.
Would you still, let me ask a question. Would you put the Chargers, right now, you think, who's better, the Chargers or Broncos? Who's a better team right now? Who's going to finish ahead in that division, Chargers or Broncos, independent of the Chiefs?
I probably would say that I would lean Chargers. I would lean towards the Chargers. Yeah. Now
they did last year, right? I mean, because they were in the Broncos were the 7 seed.
That's right.
Chargers were 5, right? Because they went to Houston as the 4.
Yeah. Part of it is just I do love Herbert. Like, I would feel very let down by him in the playoffs. But last year, he kind of did the thing that Allen did, just to a little bit of a lesser extent, is play just a clean game, don't make mistakes, you mix in, you're crazy, you've got one of the strongest arm in the league, throws that kind of pops off on highlight reels, and once in a while you'll carry your team when you need to. Josh did that, remember, they lost the Ram game, but he did that against LA, he was amazing against Detroit, where he had to put up gaudy numbers, and Herbert did that a couple times too. The difference there, though, again, like the difference between the two is Herbert has a couple of collapses in the playoffs, and Josh doesn't have that. It's a huge difference between the two. But to your question, I would say Chargers, because I think Herbert, I still feel like I see a limitless ceiling because of his arm and some of the tools he has. Bo Nix, I guess I'm just a little bit more questioning that. Like, how good can he really be? Because he might have maxed out, He's not like this crazy athlete. He's a good runner, actually, but with his arm strength and how much more you could do in that offense, I'll be interested to see what Sean Payton's got. Like, how much more can you do with Bo Nix than you did in his rookie year?